Prime Minister Mark Carney met with the leaders of Britain and France on Monday during his first overseas visit. His decision to visit Paris and London instead of Washington, as is usual for Canadian leaders, comes after U.S. President Donald Trump escalated trade tensions with both Canada and Europe and floated threats of annexing Canada.
It's more important than ever for Canada to reinforce its ties with our reliable allies.
Carney met with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris before heading off to London to meet with King Charles and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
I, Mark Carney.
Carney, a former central banker, became the leader of Canada's ruling Liberal Party this month by depicting himself as an outsider with a history of tackling crises. He argued he was best placed to oversee trade negotiations with Trump, who has threatened additional crippling tariffs on Canada and frequently muses about making the country the 51st U.S. state. In London, Carney made clear those comments were not welcome.
We've called out those comments. They're disrespectful, they're not helpful, and they need to stop before, and they will have to stop before we sit down and have a conversation about our broader partnership with the United States.
Carney has yet to speak to Trump, and the U.S. president has remained silent about his appointment. Canada has retaliated with tariffs against tens of billions of dollars worth of U.S. imports, but Carney said there are limits to what the country can do.
Full stop. There is a limit to matching these tariffs dollar for dollar, given the fact that our economy is a tenth the size of the United States.
Carney's visit was met with support by French and British leaders, who also discussed ending the war between Russia and Ukraine.
The leader of Yemen's Houthis has emerged as Iran's most prominent Arab ally and an enduring thorn in Israel's side. Abdul Malik al-Houthi has remained defiant after US President Donald Trump launched military strikes against the Houthis over their attacks on Red Sea shipping, a campaign expected to last many days. Trump also warned Iran that it must stop supporting the group, which Tehran denies. We will meet escalation with escalation, al-Houthi said. The Houthis warned on March 12th they would resume attacks on Israeli vessels in response to Israel's closure of Gaza crossings, following weeks of relative calm after a Gaza ceasefire in January. Al-Houthi's solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, he called Israel's blockade on Gaza a crime against humanity, is hugely popular in Yemen. So what do we know of him? Al-Houthi is an enigmatic figure, with a reputation as a fierce commander. Under his direction, the movement of mountain fighters grew to number tens of thousands, building a sophisticated arsenal that includes drones and ballistic missiles, and fighting a decade of war against a powerful Saudi-led coalition. Known for an extreme reluctance to appear in public, al-Houthi gives speeches on screen with a traditional Yemeni dagger in his belt. US strikes have targeted the town of Dahyan in Sada, where he often meets visitors. But the commander rarely stays long in one place, and since the start of Yemen's war, seen as a proxy conflict between Riyadh and Tehran. Foreign officials seeking meetings with him have been taken to safe houses and undergone security checks, only to encounter him on a screen, a source familiar with the matter said. Al-Houthi traces his lineage to the Prophet Muhammad and asserts that his Shiite Muslim movement is under siege because of its religion. The Houthi movement was formed to fight for the interests of the Zaydi Shiites, a minority sect that ruled a 1,000-year-old kingdom in Yemen until 1962. They felt marginalised under Ali Abdullah Saleh, the first president of a unified Yemen. Civil war erupted in late 2014 when the Houthis seized the capital, Sana'a. Saudi Arabia led a Western-backed coalition to support the government against the Houthis, who have established control over much of the north and other large population centres. The Houthis deny being puppets of Tehran and say they are fighting a corrupt system and regional aggression. The top commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guards said they are independent and take their own strategic and operational decisions. But they're now seen as the leading Arab members of the Iran-led Axis, after Israeli blows to their allies, including the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in last year's Lebanon war, and the assassination of Hamas leaders Ismail Haniyeh and Yahya Sinwar.
Rwandan-backed rebels have pulled out of peace talks with Democratic Republic of Congo's government that had been due to take place on Tuesday. The Congo River Alliance, of which the M23 group is a member, said that was because of European Union sanctions imposed on Monday. Those sanctions targeted M23, which has seized eastern Congo's two biggest cities since the start of the year, as well as Rwandan officials. The rebels said the EU sanctions were aimed at obstructing the much-anticipated talks. M23 has long demanded direct negotiations with Congo's government. However, Congo President Félix Tshisekedi has until recently refused, arguing that M23 is merely a front for Rwanda.
En soutien de leur marionnette du M23,
But after a series of battlefield setbacks and prodding from Tshisekedi's ally Angola, he agreed to send a delegation to the latter's capital Luanda for talks. The Eastern Congo conflict, rooted in the fallout from Rwanda's 1994 genocide and competition for mineral riches, has quickly spiraled since January. Thousands of people have been killed and hundreds of thousands forced from their homes as M23 seized Goma and Bukavu. The United Nations and international powers accuse Rwanda of providing arms and soldiers to fight alongside M23. Rwanda says its forces are acting in self-defense. On Monday, Rwanda hit out at Belgium, which had called for strong action against Kigali. Diplomatic relations were severed and Belgian diplomats given 48 hours to leave. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame accused former colonial power Belgium of continuing to follow and interfere with us. We warned them before, he said, and we are prepared to warn them again. Belgium's Foreign Affairs Minister said Brussels would reciprocate by declaring Rwandan diplomats persona non grata and called Rwanda's move disproportionate.
Palestinians in Gaza have weathered a year and a half of war and are used to making do without electricity. But a decision by the Israeli government to cut the supply of electricity, including to a crucial water treatment plant, has sparked fresh warnings of a dire health crisis. Ahmed Al-Rubai manages the water desalination plant in Deir el-Balah. The power cut has forced the plant to turn to fuel generators to keep operating. But fuel must be brought in through crossings, and crossings are controlled by Israel.
With the closure of the crossings and the shortage of fuel supplies, we currently cannot predict how long we can operate on generators. If the closure of crossings continues, the situation threatens to become a catastrophe.
He said daily clean water output has plummeted from 18,000 cubic meters to just 2,000 cubic meters, a drop of 80%. That means civilians may turn to contaminated water. Tariq Shaheen is the director of the Deir el-Balah municipality.
This threatens the spread of intestinal or skin diseases and reduced hygiene among citizens. Therefore, we expect that if the closure continues, God forbid, an environmental and health disaster will occur.
The war was triggered by a Hamas-led cross-border attack on southern Israel in October 2023 that killed 1,200 people and saw 251 taken hostage, according to Israeli tallies. Israel's retaliation has killed more than 48,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza health officials, left most of its people destitute, and razed much of the territory to the ground. Israel's energy minister instructed the state power company to cut sales of electricity to Gaza, which he described as a means of pressuring Hamas to free hostages. The first phase of a ceasefire that expired last week saw the release of some Israeli captives, or their bodies, in exchange for thousands of Palestinians held in Israeli jails. It's unclear whether the sides will proceed to a second
Intel's
phase.
incoming CEO Lip-Bu Tan is reportedly considering significant changes to its chip manufacturing methods and artificial intelligence strategies. That's according to two people familiar with the matter. It comes ahead of his return to the company on Tuesday in a sweeping bid to revive the ailing tech giant. The new trajectory includes restructuring the company's approach to AI, as well as staff cuts to address what Tan views as a slow-moving and bloated middle management layer. The sources added that one of his core priorities would be revamping the company's manufacturing operations. According to two other people briefed on the matter, at a town hall meeting following his appointment as CEO last week, Tan told employees that the company will need to make tough decisions. Tan is former CEO of chip design software firm Cadence. He was a member of Intel's board until he resigned last August. In returning at the helm, Tan is set to take over the American icon after a decade of multiple CEOs, in which it failed to build chips for smartphones. It also missed surging demand for AI processors. That allowed rivals ARM and Nvidia to dominate those markets. Intel reported an annual loss of $19 billion last year, its first since 1986.
China's Xiaomi beat analyst forecasts in the fourth quarter. It reported Tuesday a near 50% jump in revenue to more than $15 billion for the period. The company also raised its target for electric vehicle deliveries to 350,000 this year. Xiaomi began manufacturing EVs last year with the launch of the SU7 sedan. It had mostly sold smartphones, household appliances and smart gadgets for the majority of its 25-year history. Xiaomi reported $4.4 billion in revenue for its EV business last year and delivered more than 135,000 SU7 sedans. The adjusted net loss related to its EV and other new initiatives reached $857 million. Xiaomi's fourth quarter global smartphone shipments also rose 5% from a year earlier to 42.7 million handsets. Industry data from Canalys put it third globally with a market share of 13%. It also showed shipments in China surged 29% to 12.2 million handsets over the same period. Xiaomi also said it plans to expand its store network across China this year. And it wants to open 10,000 new Mi Home stores overseas in the next 5 years. Investors were excited and shares closed up 3.3% Monday before the earnings release. The company's shares have surged 284% over the past 12 months as its EV project boosted investors' confidence.
Are urging the Trump administration and EU officials to exclude medical goods from expanding tariff wars. They want to avert price spikes on top-selling medicines made in Europe, from Novo Nordisk's Wegovy for weight loss to Merck's cancer immunotherapy Keytruda. That's according to more than half a dozen pharma industry sources. In conversations with US officials, the pharmaceutical industry has reportedly argued that tariffs on the EU would increase drug costs and would also endanger priorities outlined in Trump's health-related executive orders on drug pricing and increasing life expectancy of Americans. Sources say some firms are signaling a willingness to expand manufacturing in the US while pressing for tax breaks and regulatory changes. Industry executives are also pressing their case with officials in Brussels. Several sources have said they want the EU to hold off on any retaliatory tariffs. Pharmaceutical products have long been spared from trade wars due to the potential harms, but Trump's moves to increase tariffs on goods from China, including finished drugs and raw ingredients, has raised expectations that medicines will join the list. The US depends on medicines partly produced in Europe that bring in hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. Novo Nordisk partially makes some of the active pharmaceutical ingredient for obesity injection Wegovy in Denmark. Merck's Keytruda and AbbVie's wrinkle treatment Botox are made in Ireland.